Hello, welcome to Chapter 3 Podcast, the show for readers of science fiction, fantasy, and romance. This is season 3, episode 15. And today, me and Izzy are here discussing the iconic political fantasy classic, Kushiel's Dart, and the new companion novel, Cassiel's Servant, by Jacqueline Carey. So I think this is going to be interesting. I'm excited to discuss. But first, if you are interested in getting access to early episodes some of the time and bonus content with every episode, you can join us on Patreon or channel memberships, support what we're doing. We appreciate it. And this episode's bonus content, we have not actually decided. What are we going to do for this episode's bonus content?
I have
We
no
could have talked about
idea.
this before. Have you seen the Barbie movie yet?
Yes.
Let's talk about the Barbie movie.
Okay, we'll talk about Barbie.
Okay, we're going to talk about the Barbie movie because we're not doing it publicly because of the SAG-AFTRA strike, but we'll do it for bonus content.
Support writers and actors.
Support writers and actors. Yes. Okay. So if you're interested in hearing our thoughts, join us on Patreon and channel memberships. Okay. So Kushiel's Dart. This was my first time reading.
This is my reread. I read this the first time in 2012. It was one of my early romances. I'm vaguely going to call it romance because I do think no matter what, this is like the do you know the Anne Bishop books, the daughter, so I don't know the title, I'm really bad about it. It's like the Black Jewels series.
Oh yeah, I haven't read them
from like 99. I think I read it's a lot, okay, like there are a lot. But I think this and that are like tie into an age demographic of our current romance fantasy authors having read and loved as younger writers.
I can see that because Kushiel's Dart has a strong romantic element to it, but I think I wasn't expecting. So what's interesting for me is that I had always heard about it as this kind of like, you know, controversially spicy book with these like BDSM sex scenes, which it does have, but like the book is so much more than that.
It's so much more
political fantasy. The character work is amazing.
Yes. Oh my god, I know, right?
I loved it.
Yeah, which I equally loved it on my reread. I was not surprised I did, but I wondered because it's been 11 years. I was like, is it going to hold up? But it's one of those ones, like I said, like to me, it's always going to be kind of like that. It's like a root in the bottom of the tree for romance fantasy books now. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like there's so much foundation for what we get in some of them now.
Yeah.
I feel like, but oh, it's so good. And it is so much more than just this like book with sex in it and fantasy elements.
Yeah. I was surprised at how much I loved it. I was just completely sucked in. It's a really long book and I flew through it.
I did too. I think I read it in 4 days.
Yeah, I think I read it in like 3. Yeah,
I think it would have been 3 if I like hadn't had some things to do one of the days. Like it was that thing where I was like, I don't want to put this down. Yes. I don't want to put this down.
Yeah.
It's so good. I don't want to stop.
Yeah. Edra is such a good character for this.
Everyone, like you grow and there's like 3 clear acts, I feel like too, which is nice. So it kind of gives you breaking points if you need to take a break. But I thought it was interesting too, just how much character development we get of everyone.
Yes.
Even people who don't make it to the end of the first book.
Yeah, that's true. And they're complicated characters. And like the world is not a perfect one by any means. It has its problems. But it's interesting because she's sort of playing with the like religion and sexuality thing in a way that
this is like my favorite trope in like books when they do religion stuff. I love when sex is like kind of part of the religion and like part of being a religious experience, because I feel like it's such a deconstruction to what we currently see with like purity culture.
Right.
So like I feel like it kind of turns it on its head a little in a nice way.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting too because it usually what you see what somebody like Jocelyn who has this vow of chastity, you see that as like a means of religious sacrifice, right? Whereas Phaedra is sort of like the opposite end of the spectrum where even her more negative experiences with sexuality she views as sort of a religious sacrifice. Yeah. Which is interesting as well, that there's like I don't
get the juxtaposition of like a purity culture situation and like a, you know, her being the Angisette with like the Kushiel's dart in her eye and like overly able to take pain, we'll call it, in situations that most people wouldn't be able to handle, and how that like shapes her differently.
Right.
Because like she has a whole like there's all those like inner monologues about how she could have used her signal, which is like her safe word, and she doesn't. And I always found that interesting too.
Yeah.
Like how like I feel like there's a couple of moments where she's inner monologuing about that kind of like I could have used the signal and I didn't, and maybe I
Right.
should have, but it's fine.
Yeah, she only does once.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, which I gotta say, Melisande is such a good villain slash antagonist.
Because you don't know. You think she's friend for so long. I feel like in the book,
No,
kind
I
of.
don't
Well,
know.
kind of.
I
Slash, not maybe gonna be as awful as she turns out to be. I feel like.
right.
But it's that name. I've read other books with that name as a villain. I
Melisande.
immediately, I'm like, that's it. Yep,
Yeah.
you're gonna be a bad character.
I mean, I think she has that vibe, like the like. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't surprised that she was gonna be,
No.
kind of an antagonist, but I think she's a really good one. They have this intense chemistry and sort of
They
like
do.
erotic
Their chemistry.
connection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because they're sort of each other's weaknesses.
Yeah, they are. I can see that.
Yeah,
What did you? So there's so much to talk about. Like, okay, hold on.
I know.
Okay, what did you think about the fact that, like, I think one of the things I think for me that works the best about Kushiel Star is that they're taking sex and these people who like they're not prostitutes, but they're kind of sex workers, right?
Yeah,
That's the word. Not that's what I'm trying to. I was like, oh my
they're
god, my
like
brain. So
religious sex
they're like
workers.
religious sex workers. But like society, our society would view them differently. But yeah, so they're religious sex workers, but they're also secretly spies, and Delaney is like training them to be spies via this work. And I feel like it's such an unexpected combination, but I'm like, how does no one expect this?
Well,
How does no one
I think
expect
it's really
this?
smart, and it's not the first time. That's
Mm-hmm.
part of why it's so effective, because like in real history, it is the case that there have been like sex workers and
Mm-hmm.
mistresses of high level people
Yeah.
who are actually spies, and it's because they're able to get access to privileged information.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the people that everybody expects. There's a reason that that's a thing that works. But I love that. I love that Phaedra
I
is
do
so
too.
much more than what people
Mm-hmm.
see her as on the surface.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just funny because, like, with the dart, especially, and like that being like such a thing, that she's then like, at one point, the one guy she confronts, and he's like, "How do you know this?" And she's like, "You said it when you like he'd like whipped her basically to a point of like almost passing out." And she's like, "You said it then." And he was like, "You were awake." And I was just like, "Damn." But it's true. Like, I love when we take like that bit of history and then put it into this like kind of world
Yeah.
where you're like, this is amazing. I
Yeah.
want more of this.
I think it makes for a really interesting person. Well, and the thing is too, I think I said this on my reading vlog about this, but it reminds me a little bit of some parts of Chinese history where there's several instances of women who were sort of like courtesans or like high-end sex workers who became
Mhm.
mistresses, ending up being very powerful or even becoming an
Yep.
empress. And
Mhm.
so I think there is precedent for this kind of story, and it's the
Mhm.
people that people underestimate.
Yep.
um and I love that thing of that prophecy that like not what is it, like something like not everything that bends is weak or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's something like that. Yeah. I agree. I
Yeah.
also love just how like so this is like a 2002 it came out. I
Yeah.
think like how openly queer and just queer accepting this entire book
Yes.
is surprising and exciting all in one go, if that makes sense. Because you don't I don't always expect it when I pick up a book that's like pre
Yeah.
2015, honestly.
Well, I mean, this is part of why I think it was so scandalous, right?
Mhm.
Is like it was queer, it had like BDSM elements, it had, like it was from the perspective of a sex worker. All of that was
Mhm.
super scandalous when it came out. One thing that's interesting to me that I think it was a bit ahead of its time in terms of the conversations that a lot of us were having
Mhm.
around consent is this idea that even people who are sex workers or people who like are sexually active still have the right to consent. And
Mhm.
I think what we see that with um Phaedra, that there is a clear delineation between times where she has consented to something, even if it's something that, you know, might physically hurt her or whatever, versus times where she hasn't. And I think that's not a conversation that was really being had at the time with most people,
so.
of the fact that yeah, like people, it is not the case that like having sex or being a sex worker means that you lose your right to consent to something.
Exactly. And I do think that part was also like equal parts, like just as fascinating.
Yeah.
I love this book.
It was so good. Well,
I can't wait to finish the trilogy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, same. And I think one of the things is she does such a good job of putting us in Phaedra's head and understanding her as a character, that even with some of the sex scenes that were a lot, where I was like, I would never, I don't, like, I feel like you understand how she feels in that moment, and you understand like how she is dealing with or interpreting things, even if it's not the same way that I would. And I think that that's just so skillfully done, because a lot of authors can't do that.
No. No. And that's where like I think Jacqueline Carey in this book and like series especially excels. And I've read Starless, I think it's called, by her or something. It was one of her more recent ones, and I enjoyed it a lot. But I think in some ways, like unfortunately, this series is like her magnum opus. You know what I mean? Like she's never, I don't know if she can ever top it. I think that's not an insult in any way, because it's just so well done that it's like kind of wild to think that it's from 2002. Like it's 21 years old.
I'm so glad that we finally got those gorgeous trade paperbacks.
I know, the old covers are so nice.
Because that's another reason I'd put it off, is I'm like, I don't want to read this like honking huge, you know, mass market. But yeah, it's so good. I guess we should talk about her relationship with she has a lot of relationships.
She does.
And that I think is interesting too, because she loves different people in different ways. And so, you know, she's got the relationship with I can't think of his name now, the king of thieves or whatever his name. What's he called?
Hyacinth.
Hyacinth. I knew it was an H.
Hyacinth. Okay. Yeah. I was like, hold on, I know this.
Yes.
Hyacinth,
thank you.
Yeah.
Hyacinth. So she's got this like childhood relationship with Hyacinth that's very complicated, and she loves him in a certain way. And then she's got this relationship with Jocelyn that is also really lovely and interesting and different. But it's you know, this idea that like the people who know her best and love her most understand that like they can't love her and try to own her or be the sole owner of her affections, because that's just not
exactly. But also like that, like the humanness of like, we all have multiple people in our lives we love, from like friend love to like love, like marry or relationship like that. But like, I think it explores that idea really well, because I feel like sometimes it feels like you're only supposed to have like the big love, like the person you married, like soulmate love. Whereas like, I firmly believe like I have like friend soulmates more than I have like love soulmates in a way sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like I
think there's so much we devalue friendship often, I guess, is what I feel like. And I feel like this kind of explores the idea of like the different types of love you could have in your life and should have if you can, because like like the love of your friends, and that is very different than like the person you're gonna live your life with, and you know, do like, I don't know, I just, you know, or like the love you have for your kids versus your parents and all that, you know, like I think I don't know, I think there's value in that, and I love the way that it's explored in this book, because you get to see the longtime friendship love that she has for Hyacinth, and then like Jocelyn being newer in her life and their like burgeoning love for each other, and like the protectiveness he feels for her, and you know, whether or not, obviously we've only read book one, if that progresses to other things, is very different. And the way that's shown, I think, as it unfolds over the next two books is going to be very insightful, and like that a nice payoff, right? Because we've watched them become kind of enemies to lovers, almost like distaste for each other, we'll call it. Because Jocelyn's just so buttoned up as a
Yeah.
hero slash character in a weird way at times.
I saw, so I mean, obviously I haven't read on in the series, but I saw a Q&A thing with Jacqueline Carey one time where people I think
Mhm.
ask a lot about the relationship between Jocelyn and Phaedra, and her response makes me think that she intentionally made it not one that is continues to be sexual, or at least not
Mhm.
in a way that we know for sure.
Yeah.
Because their relationship is intended to be about a lot more than just
Mhm.
whether they're sleeping together. And I think that that is also just kind of a cool way of doing things. And the
Mhm.
other thing that really stood out to me about this is like the idea that like love doesn't mean somebody owns you or
Yeah.
owns your body. Like you belong
Mhm.
to yourself, not to other
Mhm.
people. And like there's the times where Phaedra has, been kidnapped and enslaved, where people are like,
Mhm.
well, I own you. And those are the times where, okay, this is not consensual, this is sexual assault.
Mhm.
Like this is not yeah. So I don't know. Like I think that that's huge. And I think especially as somebody coming from a more religious background where eh, like you really are taught that, like, well, when you
Mhm.
marry, your body is no longer your own, it belongs to your spouse. Like the way that
Yeah.
this subverts that, I think is powerful. I'm glad I read it at this point in my life, because I couldn't have read
You would
this
not have
book.
liked it pre this point in your I mean, like,
No.
pre your, like, deconstruction, I don't know
Yeah.
that you would have enjoyed it as much.
No.
I agree, and exactly, like, I just think that's, like, I always see people who love the series who are like, "It's so much more than that, though." Like, we can't just answer the question of, "Are they together?"
Right.
There's so much more to this, and
Right.
I'm like, "Yes." As I
Yes.
revisited this, I was like, "Yes, there is so much more," and
It's
I
beautiful.
get why there's, like, a cult following for this book, honestly,
Yeah.
like, rereading it again, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I should have finished this years ago, like, what is wrong with me?"
Yeah. Well, and
ADHD, that's what, it's fine.
the political intrigue is so good.
It
And,
is. Oh my
the
gosh. The
way that,
reveals
like,
about Delaney,
yeah, yeah,
ugh,
it's so good. Well, and I love that power in this world doesn't end up necessarily belong to the strongest person. It belongs to the
mhm,
smartest person and the
yeah,
canniest person and cleverest.
mhm,
And the
yeah,
way that she plays those siblings off each other, for
mhm,
instance,
yeah.
to get them to do what she wants them to do and go to war. It's so good.
Well, and I feel like in that first act, we watched Delaney start to shape Phaedra into who we see her as an adult, after, like, he dies and stuff, and then, like, we get his reveals about being, like, the king's lover, and his poetry being banned, and, the girl they're gonna put on the throne, like, how he was sworn to protect her,
Yeah.
and we start getting, like, all those little bits, and then Melisandre is, like, over here doing her thing, and you're just like, "Holy crap." But then you watch Phaedra be like, figuring it like, her figuring it out, like, what happened when she went to Melisandre when, the murder happened of Jelani, and, like, they showed up and, like, he's dead and the other guy's dead, I cannot remember his name. The one who, like, sold himself and, like, paid off his
Oh,
mark,
Anguil or Ang it starts with an A.
I listened to it on audio and I still can't say his name, so yeah, that guy.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Um, and, like, they're all found dead and, like, she runs off and it turns out, like, "Oh, yeah, no, I've been betrayed."
Right.
And here we go getting, we're off on the second act where I feel like is the frozen wasteland adventure that seemed miserable.
So much happens in this book. Like, there and I one thing too that it reminded me of is I feel like this is how fantasy novels used to be,
Mhm.
where one book would tell a whole epic story. It didn't feel like it
I
was
could see
just
that.
drawn out, because the thing is today this
Mhm.
book would have been a trilogy on its own. You know what I mean?
Instead of the trilogy we have, which is, like, probably 9 books, I'm
Yeah.
assuming, like, by the time I get through all of it.
Right. Well, but I find it so much more satisfying. Honestly,
It
it
is.
reminds me like how.
I listen, I've talked about this some with, like, not fantasy, but Pucking Around for me. I really enjoyed it because, yes, it's long, But it's one book, and instead of giving me a duet of 400 pages each, you just gave me 750 pages of a whole book. You know what? Thank you.
Yeah.
And I agree, though. Like, this easily would have been a trilogy of books that are 600 pages each, probably.
But then
And
you
the
end
middle
up
book
getting
would
a
have
lot of
suffered.
padding, and it's just
Yeah.
not, I don't know, it's very
And
satisfying.
it would have had the same middle book issue that a lot have, though. I feel like that our trilogies where that middle book's just filler.
Right. Yeah.
Or it would have been a duet cut too short. Like,
yeah. No, I like
it
it.
just
I wish
needed
we
to
would get
be
we need more
900
like
pages. I think the new version's 600 and something, but
yeah.
The old version is like 900 pages.
Well, because it was the mass market, like
Yeah, I know, but still,
it's a long book.
it's still long.
But it covers a lot of ground. It makes me think too, like there's definitely some stuff coming out right now that is long, but like not much really happens. Because sometimes I do pick up fantasy books and it's like 500 pages, and I'm like, why was this 500 pages?
Yeah, yeah.
So.
I mean, that was also with the other book of the series. It's fine. But no, that's the thing is, I never. It's very rare I pick up a book this long because I'm not a long book person these days. Like, I like to be able to finish a book in like a day or two. And I probably could have finished this in a day or two, honestly, if I hadn't had other stuff going on. Like, I could have easily gotten, if I was like working at a desk job, I probably would have finished the audiobook in 2 days, like without trying. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those books where you're just like, I don't want to stop, and I'm not going to.
Yeah, like it's propulsive. You want to keep reading. It's it's like compared to you. Okay, so we need to talk about Cassiel's Servant.
Yeah.
So why?
Only one of us finished that book.
What?
So I said,
you
and
didn't
only one
it.
of us finished it.
How much of it did you read?
35%.
Okay, so you got the interesting part.
Well, that's. Do you want to talk about it? Or do you want me to tell you why I DNF'd it immediately when I saw your review?
Tell me.
So I was like reading it, and I went on Goodreads, and I was like, I'm just curious about the reviews because I got through the good part.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, is the rest of the book just this? Because I just read the other book, and I don't need this. And this being literally the most boring retelling of the book, Kushiel's Dart, in Cassiel's POV, where you're just like, I already know all this.
Yeah.
I didn't need this.
Yeah.
I thought going in, we were getting a lot more of his early childhood and like what it meant to be Cassiel's servant and all of that stuff. Like the beginning part of the book. That's what I thought this book was. Like, I was positive it was going to be that.
See, I knew it was a retelling.
Well, I knew it was a retelling. I just thought it was going to have more of that. Does that make sense? Like, more of his like early childhood stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, that was like the 500 pages were like maybe 200 of that, and then the rest was a retelling, because then I could live with that. Yeah. But no, it's like 20, not even 20%.
Like the first 20% is his. So yeah, so I think you said you saw my review of it.
Yes.
Decided to DNF. Yeah, so I mean, this is the thing. I don't know why this was the choice. I think what it should have been was an anthology with a novella of the first 20% of this book, which was genuinely really interesting and really good. I do recommend reading that because it's about Jocelyn's childhood, his years training with the Cassiel Brotherhood, and stuff that kind of made him into the character that we know. And that actually was really cool. It was interesting.
It was really good.
It was really
liked
good.
That part.
Very good. It added to the character work. It added to the world. Like, that was fantastic. But then, the whole rest of the book pretty much was a much less interesting retelling of everything that happened in Kushiel's Dart. There were some scenes. I think what we should have had was an anthology that included the novella of the first 20%, and then a few short stories pulling key scenes. Because there were a handful of scenes throughout it where I was like, okay, this is cool to see his perspective on. This actually
I got to the one where he like carried her out of a thing, and like she was mad about him for carrying her, and that was cute to see from his perspective. Yeah. But then I was like, I can't do this.
Right. Well, and I
like,
think also
this is a book slump waiting to happen.
Yeah. No, I get it. It was a chore to get through a lot of it, honestly. which is unfortunate. Because I love the first 20%. I was like, oh, this is so good. And then I was like, oh no. There were some scenes, I mean, like, you know, the scene where they, like the one night where they sleep together, like getting that from his perspective was interesting. So like there were a handful of scenes, but this should not have been a full-length novel. This should have been an anthology with a few short stories pulling his perspective on those interesting places. I don't know why.
500 pages?
Yes.
Which, like, if his perspective to retell the 900-page book would not be 500 pages. It should have been like 300 at most.
It was not that interesting. Well, the thing is, too, is also seeing it from his perspective is less interesting because he doesn't know as much as Phaedra does. He's kind of an outsider. A lot of the interesting key scenes, he's just like hanging outside the room waiting for her to be done with her assignation. You know, like it's just not very interesting for the most part. And like
he doesn't have great internal monologue or anything either. He's kind of like, I think the appeal of him in the book regular, like Kushiel's Dart, is that you don't know a lot.
Right.
So you're learning about the Brotherhood. You're learning about his, like, some of his, like, belief systems and who he is as a person. And then you get in his head in this book and you're like, you're really boring.
Yeah.
You're really boring.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so disappointing. It was so disappointing.
Yeah. I read a review that I agree with that's like, he doesn't have main character energy. Like, even in his own book, Phaedra is still the main character.
I can see that. I don't disagree.
Yeah.
And I think some of that is just because, like, that's in the plot of Kushiel's Dart and in the series. I feel like, I mean, obviously I've read the other two, but I still feel like he's there to serve Phaedra's story.
Right.
Not his own story. Like, I don't know that he ever needed a full length.
Well, and also, like, Phaedra is interesting because she is a person who's subverting a lot of the traditional ideas we have about, like, sex and gender. And then to go and read a whole book where it's the same thing told from the perspective of something who doesn't subvert any of those things is also just kind of like,
It has lots of, like, really bad information, I feel like, on what her servitude is and what it means. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he doesn't know enough.
He learns eventually, like he eventually kind of changes his perspective on her and stuff. But anyway, I don't know. I don't know why this was the choice.
Yeah, I don't either. Like I said, I read your review, I read the review links, and I was like, yeah, no, we're just done. I was like, I'm not putting myself in a book slump for this. I rarely will DNF things for podcasts. Like, that is like one of the things where I'm like, no, I'll push through. And then I was like, no, we're good. We can just stop.
You read the most interesting part of the book.
That's what I figured. As I was listening, like, I mean, normally I'm like, cool, I'm just audiobooking, doing tasks, doing things. And I was just like, I could just take a nap right now.
Yeah.
And let this book play and sleep. And I was like, that's not good.
I would read a book from the perspective of Melisande.
Yes.
Now that would be interesting. Because she has main character energy.
Yes. Also, like, if this was an anthology of, like, short stories, that would be a perfect one to throw in.
Right? You could do some stuff from her perspective. That's the thing. There's a world in which I could have loved this if this had been different, you know?
Do you think because of how we read it back to back, if you had previously read Kushiel's Dart and we just read Cassiel's Servant, it wouldn't have been as bad?
I don't know. I think it still wouldn't be bad because I've now read reviews from some people who also are like longtime fans of the series who just were not that impressed. I just don't think it's as interesting. I mean, I think it probably stands out more to us because we just read Kushiel's Dart. So, you know, like, maybe if you haven't in a while and you really love Jocelyn, like, you might, like, I'm not saying don't read it.
No, it's not like you gave it 2.5. And I think if I'd finished it, it probably would have sat at about a 3, 2.5 for me as well.
It's not a terrible book.
It's not badly written by any means. No. It's just, like, boring.
Yeah. Well, it's disappointing because Kushiel's Dart is so magical and propulsive, and this wasn't.
And that's the thing. Like, it feels, like, so flat comparatively.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like weird. I don't know.
But I don't think it's her
Are they doing
writing.
others?
I think it's because of who he is.
I don't think it's her writing either, because like when you got bit, like again that intro bit, right? When it wasn't just following all of Kushiel's dark bit. They said I knew it was a retelling, but I thought we were getting like a little bit more of like the backstory for Jocelyn, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I just thought there would be just like a little bit more, just a little bit more.
Yeah.
I just like, I mean, it made me sad because like I don't like, obviously, like you never want to have to read a book that like that low, or like to like, especially when you liked the other book.
Right.
Like, no, this is not it. Like it just made me sad, and then I just kept getting more mad about it. I was like, I'm done. This is just so disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, it's reasonable. I mean, I finished it because of the podcast. So,
well, that's why I saw you finish. I was like, I'm gonna do enough.
I think it's fine. Honestly, I don't think that you missed a whole lot. Like, I don't know that there's that
and
much.
I may go back to it at some point if I just like.
You could skim through it. Well, I would tell people read the first 20% and then sort of like skim the rest of it for like
that may be what I do.
The major scenes, because there are some really good scenes, but we just didn't need the whole novel like that. It was a lot.
And I think that's what I'll do, because I was listening to it, so it's kind of hard to skim when you're listening. So I think I might pick up my Kindle version, because I got an e-arc too, or the physical, and flip through some, and then I'm gonna rehome that art to somebody.
Yeah,
that wants it. Maybe go put it in a little free library.
Yeah.
Something.
No.
Now I'm like, and it's such a good cover. Like it's a great cover.
Great cover.
You know, and that's the thing though. I think that 20% could have easily just been bonus content in the new release.
Well, or it could have, I mean, if they want, I don't think it's bad to do a standalone, but I think this should have been like a 250-page anthology. Or just do that as a novella, like, you know.
Yeah, that too. I mean, that's the thing, is that even then it could have been that. And then like some chapters from his POV though could have been bonus content. Like,
yes,
without it being like 500 pages of yeah. It was just sad. Like I truly was just so sad about it. I was like, this was not fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, it was a mixed experience.
Kushiel's Dart.
Kushiel's Dart, though, I loved. 5 stars.
Yeah.
Easily. And I do want to keep going with that original trilogy. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I am too. I'm gonna actually finish my read through of it now.
Nice.
Because I've been needing to reread it. So when this came up, I was like, perfect.
Yes.
I can actually finish the series
now.
No,
I'm so glad that we did this, because it's also, Kushiel's Dart's been one of those things that's been on my radar for years, where I've been like waffling on, should I read it? Should I not? And I think it's good that I read it when I did, because I don't think I would have liked it if I'd read it when I first was aware of it like years ago. But I'm really glad that I did now. It was great. Yeah.
It's so fun. It's so fun.
So good. So yeah, go check out Kushiel's Dart if you like political fantasy. I think, yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting because, like, and this is the thing too, is I don't think you have to like BDSM stuff to read this book.
No, you don't.
Because of how good the character work is.
Well, and I think it, I wouldn't say you don't like it. You have to be open to it being on page, though.
Right.
This is what I would say. You don't have to love it. It doesn't have to be your favorite thing ever to read. But I think like you have to be open to it being on page, and understanding that it does serve a purpose in the story. It's not just like gratuitous. This book is not just gratuitous, like sex fantasy.
No.
Book. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like some people think that it that way,
but it's not.
You know, our favorite people with clean fantasy authors probably view it that way, right? And it's not that. Like, I think of Sierra Simone's like Priest series and Sinner, where like sexuality and sex is explored again, also through religion and being a religious experience. It's kind of like that. Like, you just kind of got to be open to the concept of this has more meaning than just like, whips and chains excite me.
Right. I mean, you know what I feel like though, is I feel like in terms of my reading experience, like Katie Robert ran so that Kushiel's Dart could fly. Like, I feel like I was like, I feel like started reading Katie Robert, like, got me a little more acclimated to some of this
I could see that. I could see that.
So that by the time I got to this, I was like, okay, I can deal with this.
I could see that.
Yeah.
And I mean that's the thing too. Like that, this is a book. It's fascinating if you go look at a lot of authors that write romance fantasy and some BDSM stuff now. This is one of the books that was influential to them.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting to see that, like now.
And there is
coming
very
forward.
like, yeah, and with her official like assignations, there is very clear consent. Like she has a safe word. She can put a stop to things if she wants to.
Yes.
It's not. Yeah, so it's like some of it is some kind of intense stuff that I'm like, I don't.
And you can skim it. You could skim it.
Yeah, you can skim it. You don't have to like read it in detail. I don't know. A lot of it is stuff where I'm like, but I think it depends. Like some people are probably going to read this and be like, ooh, like this is sexy. And I'm reading it and I'm like, oh God, it couldn't be me. But I understand who you are, Phaedra, and like how you're responding in this situation.
I feel that way reading some romances that have certain types of sex scenes that I just have no desire ever to engage in. But I'm like, this is fun to read.
Right. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not getting taken by the aliens.
That's the thing is like people can like different things and that's okay.
Yeah. And it's a fun way to just explore things that you like wouldn't want to do in real life necessarily, but it's a fun time to read about.
There you go.
I don't want to be kidnapped, you know, but sometimes it's fun to read a kidnap romance.
Oh man.
This one, I would not survive in this world. It's fine.
Oh, it's a brutal world.
I would not survive, so it's fine.
Yeah. I like, we didn't talk about, I like the tattoo thing.
Oh, the tattoo thing is really cool. The mark.
It's really cool. Yeah, that like getting the completed tattoo means that they're now freed from like enslavement. I think that's kind of an interesting way to do it. And like a visual symbol of freedom for them. I thought that was interesting.
It was. I really liked that element of it. And yes, a ton of people do have that tattoo. That's how much of a cult favorite it is. I know. I just think it's funny. Like, it's one of those books that you just like, you're like, huh, that's so interesting. And then I was like, oh yeah, people have that tattoo.
I mean, I can see how this would be really formative for a lot of people. Yeah. Well, especially if you read it younger, because I do know there are people who've said to me that like this was something they read as a teenager that was really sort of formative for their ideas of romance and it's interesting. Yeah.
It's cool. I think it's cool. I think it's fun that people like love it. I love that it has such a cult following.
Yeah.
Like I just think it's really neat.
Yeah.
Like especially for something that came from 2002 to be this. And I had people who were like, yeah, I bought it at Borders. And I was like, oh my God, Borders.
Back in the day. Yeah. Well, cool. I feel like I've, read a classic that I had not. So
same. I felt like, it felt good to revisit it. I know I've read it before, but it still felt just as fresh the second time through.
I could see myself rereading this in the future too. It's that good. So, yeah. Yep.
It is.
Cool. Well, hopefully this was interesting and helpful for everybody. And we are going to move into On My Radar, where we'll share recent and upcoming book releases we're excited about for romance. But first, of course, if you enjoy the podcast, we would appreciate if you take a moment to rate and review us so we can continue to reach more listeners. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, comment down below with any of your thoughts on Kushiel's Dart or Cassiel's Servant. Love to hear from you there. And if you are interested in getting exclusive bonus content with every episode, consider supporting us on Patreon or channel memberships. Huge thanks to all of our supporting patrons, including our World Expander patrons. Stephanie, you make what we do possible. We really appreciate you. And again, this week's bonus content will be our discussion of the Barbie movie, which is the only way that you're going to hear our discussions of the Barbie movie because of the ongoing strike. So go support SAG-AFTRA and the writers. Okay, so
I'm sad I can't talk about that movie more publicly yet.
I know.
That's why I say unfortunately. I want them to get paid. So
yes, but there's so much to talk about.
There is.
So, okay, so there are a lot of romances coming out in August.
Holy crap!
So many.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start with one. The Secret to a Southern Wedding by Cynthia Williams This one looks really fun.
I was looking at this the other day.
Yeah, it's kind of like a take on an adult parent trap. The two main characters, their parents are getting married to each other. The heroine wants to sabotage the wedding so it doesn't happen, and the hero wants them to get together.
Okay.
So, like, because his dad's happy and like he's happy about that, and then they fall for each other, which I think sounds like fun. And I love Sydney T. Williams. She does like juicy drama really good.
I agree with this. She does. I've heard good things from the people I've seen that have read it so far, so
cool.
I'm excited. I'll do Kiss the Girl by Zoraida Cordova. I have a huge list here, so we're just gonna have to see whose we steal from each other.
It's fine. It's fine.
I really loved If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. I thought that one was delightful. I did skip Jasmine Guillory's because I don't generally like get along with her writing very well or enjoy her stories. And the couple people I know that read it that like I align with on that didn't like it. So I was
it wasn't very good. It was probably me. I didn't like it.
It was you, and there was a couple other people I follow too. So like I was like, I'll just skip Jasmine's. Yeah. But this one is about Ariel's band that's on their farewell tour, and she kind of like sneaks out and ends up on stage with a band at like a little like bar or something. And her sisters are with her, so like that's Eric, of course, and it just looks really cute. And these truly like, I think if I liked Jasmine Guillory's writing more and storytelling, I would have read and enjoyed the other one, but because I don't, I was just like, we'll skip it. But I like Zoraida's writing, so I think this will be a fun one. Like it just sounds fun.
It looks cute. Fun. I'm curious to see some reviews. It's
one that it like, just came out like on the 1st. So I don't think these get a lot of attention.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little iffy on musician romances, but like if the reviews are good, I do like Zoraida's writing, so I'm curious to see.
She's always like at least in the middle for me.
Yeah.
Like she's consistently like either good or like a 3-star good.
I almost always give her like 3 to 4 stars.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. She's very consistent. She's a good writer.
So I'm curious. And Little Mermaid's not my favorite, but I still enjoy a Little Mermaid retelling situation.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So one that I want to read, I got this as an audio copy from Libra FM, and after I heard somebody review it on TikTok, because it sounds really cool, The Art of Scandal by Regina Black. So it says it's a sizzling conversation-starting debut about rekindling passion, the transformative power of art, and finding love in unexpected places. And it's about a woman who finds out her husband had been cheating on her and she wants to get a divorce, but he wants to run for office. So they make a deal that she'll stay in the marriage. But then she meets an artist and starts falling in love with him and has to decide like what's she gonna do. So
I got this one last month too. I didn't know it didn't. I don't always realize when they don't come out. I'm like, oh, that doesn't come out until August. Okay.
Yeah, cool. It comes out this month. But yeah, supposedly someone was saying that they loved it. So I've heard some good things.
I've heard good things too. So sounds promising.
Yeah.
I've got Tastes Like Shakar by Nisha Sharma. That just came out earlier this month on the 1st, I believe. I enjoyed Dating Dr. Dill. I didn't like the weird penis nickname thing. That was weird. But overall, I thought it was just like a fun rom-com-y-esque read. Definitely hit the rom-com more than like most of the books that I see marketed as rom-coms do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like effectively, I feel like usually I pick up a book that says that and I'm like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. This one is about an egotistical chef and the best friend of the groom, and then the bride's best friend planning the wedding. And they're trying to like plan the menu and all these things and stop it from being ruined, and they're very much like at odds with each other. So I think it'll be a fun time. I think Nisha writes like at the very least like solid fun books to read, even if it's not a 5-star. Like I just think it sounds like a fun time.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds good. Okay, I'm gonna go with Codename Charming by Lucy Parker. This one is a romantic comedy about a fake relationship between a grumpy royal bodyguard and a charming sunny assistant who melts his cold hard exterior. And I really like Lucy Parker's books. This is I think the second book in a series, and I really liked the first one a lot. So this is one I might try to get my hands on if I can.
I love that it's like royal adjacent.
Yes.
If that makes sense. Like it's not the royals, but it's like
it's adjacent. Well, the other one was too. It was about two bakers who are like enemies, but are competing. Oh, I loved it. But it was.
I tried the audio and didn't like it, and I think I need to try
Okay.
it otherwise.
That's fair.
Her other series, the London Celebrity series, if you haven't read those, are
Oh
really
yeah,
good.
yeah. I've read
I really love
like
those.
3 of those. I think those are really good. Yeah.
Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, on the 20. Okay, Millie, my God, that was a big. My Roommate is a Vampire comes out on the 29th. I did not write the author down. This one just sounds bananas to me. Like, basically, she ends up rooming with a vampire and gets a deal on the apartment. Cassie's her name. Her roommate's name is Frederick, and he's never awake during the day and always awake at night. I just think it sounds silly. Like, the cover is ridiculous. Like, it's him, like,
Yeah.
hanging upside down in a
It's very
window
campy.
and her
Yeah.
in the other window. And I was like, this listen, if this delivers, I'm here for it because it just sounds so silly.
It
And I
does.
think it's her discovering, obviously, that he's a vampire.
Right. Yeah.
Which, like, anyone who, like, reads paranormal, I feel like our first thought is, like, this person's a vampire. They're never awake during the day. They're a vampire.
Clearly,
Gotta
they're a
get out.
vampire. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're also getting Knockout by Sarah McLean, which is about a chaotic blue stocking and the buttoned up detective enlisted to keep her out of trouble. Spoiler, she is the trouble.
She is the trouble. She's gonna blow things up.
Yeah, it looks fun.
It will be. How many is that?
It's a lot. I think I've got 2 more on the list. So
Okay. I can do another one. Marry Me by Midnight by Felicia Grossman is a historical with twist on Cinderella. Isabel has to marry to save her family. She enlists a synagogue custodian to help her ensure the matches have no alliances that would harm her or her family. And it's their romance, and it sounds really, really cute. The cover is adorable.
and she's
I'm very
Jewish,
excited to read this.
which
And
is
she is Jewish,
interesting
and
for a
it is
historical.
own rep.
Yeah.
All of Felicia's are. I've read her before. I read Appetites and
Okay.
Vices and really liked it, so I'm excited to try this one as well.
Okay, good to know. I haven't read from her, but they sent me a copy of that, so cool.
I got an e-arc of it. I just have not
Okay.
gotten to it because historical.
Yeah. Okay, well, the last one I've got is Cruel Seduction by Katie Robert, which I have finished reading already, and I'm excited to record our podcast for next
I'm very
month.
excited for Cruel Seduction.
We will be back to discuss that one. It is a very, very messy polyamorous relationship between.
It's a polycule?
Yes.
Polyknot. It's a polyknot.
I don't know if it's. What does a knot mean? Like, what does that mean? Because not everybody has relationships with each other.
I think that's why it's a knot.
Okay.
Because it's like the people in the middle and then it goes out.
Yeah. I guess.
I think that's what that means. I'm not. Okay. I don't know. That's what
Katie
I don't know. Calls it.
Anyway, but it's a polyamorous relationship between Hephaestus, Aphrodite, Adonis, and Pandora. And there's also some interesting macro plot stuff. So
I am hoping for lots of political development.
There is a bit. I want more, but yeah. So we
always want more.
We always want more. She leaves you wanting more. So yeah, that is one we will have an episode on with some guests in September. So it's coming out this month if you want to read it before the episode. Our next episode is going to be August 29th. I'll be back with Leanna to discuss Lady of the Lake by Andrzej Sapkowski. So if you're following along for our Witcher read along, that will be coming next up. And again, this has been Chapter 3 Podcast. We're your hosts, Bethany and Izzy. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Chapter 3 Podcast, and you can find us on our individual YouTube channels. Remember to join us August 29th for our next episode, and this episode's bonus content will be available to